Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is on assignment. Thanks for being here today. We begin this hour with the future of abortion rights in America. In a 5-4 ruling on Friday, the Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade and other precedents that recognized a federal right to abortion. The decision marks the first time the High Court has both granted a constitutional right and then revoked it. So-called trigger laws immediately banning abortion are now in effect in several states, and in the coming weeks, at least 18 states are expected to implement similar restrictions. The ruling sets up state-level battles over abortion access, including over abortion-inducing pills delivered by mail, escalating a political flashpoint ahead of pivotal midterm elections this fall.
Every child deserves life. Human rights start at conception and end at natural death, and that is what I'm going to fight for until the day that I die.
Over the weekend, abortion rights supporters took to the streets in scores of American cities as opponents celebrated a historic victory nearly 50 years in the making. This morning, more calls to action by supporters of abortion rights are being heard across America as some states begin restricting the reproductive rights women have had for the last 50 years. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander joins us now from Atlanta, Georgia. Hi, Blaine. Good morning.
Well, Savannah, good morning to you. You know, in some places across the country, that change was immediate. Clinics either shutting their doors or stopping services as the court's decision came down. In other places, states immediately started putting change in motion. Here in Georgia, the Attorney General has asked a court to allow a law to take effect that would reduce abortion access from 20 weeks down to 6 weeks. And of course, all of this comes as we are seeing protests across the country, people either celebrating or mourning the court's decision.
In every corner of the country, emotions spilling into the streets. Anger and fear facing relief, joy, all responding to the end of Roe v. Wade.
The feeling of just total despair.
We have gained protection for the most innocent members of the human family.
Some weekend protests turned violent. In Arizona, officers used tear gas to break up protesters at the state capitol. And in Rhode Island, a police officer running for state senate was arrested after allegedly punching his female opponent during an abortion rights rally. He has since pulled out of the race. At an abortion rights protest in Los Angeles, viral video shows Full House actress Jodie Sweetin pushed to the ground by police officers. The LAPD says it is aware of the video and use of force will be evaluated. Following the court's decision Friday, at least 10 states immediately restricted abortion access, with many banning the procedure altogether, including Alabama, where at the Women's Center in Huntsville, Dalton Johnson had to break the news to women already in the waiting room.
What was it like in that room?
It was just raw emotions. It was everything from people that were upset, angry, people breaking down, crying.
In Arkansas, where abortion was legal up to 20 weeks, doctors now could face up to 10 years in prison for performing the procedure. The only exception, life of the mother. At least 3 more states shut down services, with the law still unclear. But at least 16 states and Washington, D.C. have laws protecting the right to an abortion. Among those states, Illinois, where over the weekend, President Trump took a victory lap on his conservative court appointments at a rally with Republican House member Mary Miller, who made these controversial comments.
I want to thank you for the historic victory for life in the Supreme Court yesterday.
Miller's campaign says she misread her prepared remarks and meant to say right to life. The pivotal Supreme Court case originated with this Mississippi abortion clinic, where this morning women are still attending appointments. State law allows 10 days before it has to shut down. Tyler Hardin runs Planned Parenthood in the state.
If you have appointments in these next 10 days, keep those appointments and make those appointments.
And this morning, we are now getting a new look at just how Americans feel about the court's decision. A new poll out today from NPR and PBS NewsHour shows that a majority of Americans, 56%, oppose the court's decision. Savannah.
All right, Blaine Alexander, thank you so much. Let's now bring in NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams for more on all this. Pete, good morning. Of course, we're happy to have you on to discuss this with us today. So, I mean, first, just put this in perspective. I mean, we'd heard from you here at NBC News prior to this happening, and you had said it would be hard to overstate the importance of this here. That certainly seems true today. But just walk us through just how monumental this is, both from a legal but also a historical perspective.
Well, legal perspective, because, of course, it overturns 50 years of abortion precedents, not just Roe, but all the cases that followed on for Roe, in which the Supreme Court repeatedly said that there is a constitutional right to abortion. And then just the effect on people. This is a series of decisions, an abortion right that millions of American women have depended on, who have sought abortions in the years since Roe. And the other thing, of course, is the Supreme Court, it's not the first time the Supreme Court has ever granted a right and taken it away, but it is the first time the Supreme Court has ever granted a right that was widely recognized, that applied to millions of Americans, and then 50 years later, 49 years later, took it away.
And Pete, let's talk about these potential other rights. So that's kind of where this conversation is going now, of course, especially since we saw Justice Thomas's opinion. But what does this mean in terms of this right to privacy and any other right that is sort of rooted in that? I mean, does the logic here mean that if that's what they used to overturn Roe versus Wade, that we could see that if any case concerning any of those rights comes before the court? What do you think could happen here?
Well, I am no expert on what's going to happen or what could happen, but let me explain why the issue is even raised in the first place. What the Supreme Court's opinion says is that not only is abortion not mentioned in the Constitution, but the right can't be derived from the Constitution, because while the 14th Amendment does guarantee a substantive due process, or due process of, it says you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, that depends on whether a right, Justice Alito said, joined by the other four conservatives, that right is deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. Well, by that test, abortion, he says, fails the test, but so would the right to same-sex marriage, so would the right to obtain contraceptives, interracial marriage, decide where your children will be educated, lots of things that the Supreme Court has said over the years, right to travel and so forth, that are derived from the 14th Amendment. Now, Justice Alito says in his opinion several times, don't worry, this is just about abortion, and abortion is different because it involves the taking of a human life, and those other things don't. And Justice Kavanaugh, in his concurrence, said the same. Those other rights aren't threatened. But because of the logic the court used, that's why this question has arisen.
And Pete, given the makeup of the court right now, the conservative majority, how could that play out? Could we see more of these rulings that overturn those established laws and the rights of Americans? I think people who read these different opinions from these different justices, all still conservative justices, but don't know what that means. OK, so we see some saying, hey, don't worry about it. Others saying, no, this logic would apply. What do you think that means with the makeup of the court?
Well, to be clear, others on the court aren't saying the logic should apply. Only one other, that's Clarence Thomas, and he did say that the court should now revisit all those earlier substantive due process decisions on contraceptive, same-sex marriage, and so forth. But remember, the Supreme Court doesn't decide these things in a vacuum. It decides cases that come to the court. So what would have to happen here is that a state would have to pass a law restricting one of those rights, saying, you know, you can't, same-sex couples can't marry, or there's no right to get contraceptives, or trying to restrict those rights in some way, and then they would have to come to the Supreme Court. And I think if they, I mean, my guess is if they did come to the Supreme Court right now, the court wouldn't overturn them. But that's right now, who knows what could change. You can either take the words that Alito and the others offer that say, don't worry, these others are safe, or you can look at the logic of the decision, and I think all you can say is that they're safe for now.
Pete Williams, thank you so much. Of course, your expertise is so appreciated this morning. Now, the ruling is likely to have a huge impact on the midterm elections. Joining us now is NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, good morning. So right after the ruling, President Biden spoke about the decision. First, let's listen to a bit of that, and we'll talk on the other side.
This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot. Until then, I will do all of my power to protect a woman's right in states where they will face the consequences of today's decision.
Mark, talk about the impact that this could now have on midterms.
Yeah, Savannah, I think we're set on a collision course between an unpopular Democratic president. We just saw President Joe Biden, whose approval ratings are in the low 40s, and an election season that had, up until Friday, had been kind of hinging on pocketbook issues with a collision course with now 50 years of Roe versus Wade precedent being overturned. And I think a lot of the assumptions about this midterm season before Friday, and that was we were going to see low turnout, that Democrats aren't as enthusiastic, that the economy and inflation will dominate. I think a lot of those kind of expectations might need to be reset. And so I think we have a very big scramble and a collision course that's now set for November.
And Mark, since this court decision was announced, what's the Republican Party's message been around this? Have they been united in it, or has the reaction even on that side been split?
Yeah, so Savannah, it's actually been really interesting. It's kind of been all over the place. And so a lot of Republicans have celebrated, have actually said we're going to go farther, maybe even pushing national legislation if we take back the Congress as well as the presidency in 2024. But other Republicans have been kind of silent on the issue and want to talk about other issues. And so I think it's been all over the place. And I do think that that is a little bit different than kind of the unifying message that we're hearing, at least right now, from Democrats.
All right, Mark Murray, thank you so much. Lots to watch for as we head towards to November. Now we turn to Michigan, where a dormant law from 1931 that criminalizes abortion took effect following Friday's Supreme Court decision. A court injunction is currently in place, though, keeping abortion legal for now. It's just one of several states with pre-Roe versus Wade abortion bans on the books, with some dating back more than a century. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she spoke to 4 women there about the court's decision. Dasha, good to have you with us. Thanks for being here. So what was the reaction? What's the first reaction from the women you spoke to after they learned that Roe versus Wade was overturned?
Well, look, Savannah, if you look to Washington on this issue, you would think it's very clearly red or blue, black or white. But it turns out when you sit down and you talk to people, this becomes a lot more purple, a lot more gray. We sat down with 4 women, all from Republican backgrounds, all from religious backgrounds, but who vary pretty greatly in terms of their response to the court's decision and their view on abortion. Take a listen to just some of what they told us.
I was very overwhelmed with joy. We all have value, that we are born with an inherent dignity, all of us, that can never be removed, no matter what we've done, from the first moments of conception until natural death.
On Friday, honestly, I cried on and off all day. I have a daughter who's 7, and I just think about the fact that, you know, this is going to start rolling out so many different legal implications for human rights. You know, some of the justices have already made their, opinions clear that they want to now go back and revisit a lot of different human rights that people fought so hard to have.
My first reaction was, please let us not then take this pendulum and swing it ways so that now, like, abortion illegal for anything. There's
no black or white, all or nothing.
Black or white, all or nothing, because that's not going to do any good. Abortion is not going to go away because of this ruling.
And Savannah, Kent County, as you may remember from my many visits here, is a county that was traditionally red but turned blue in 2020. It'll be interesting to see how this affects some of the voting patterns here, especially as this has sort of been viewed as a bastion of moderate Republicanism. Where do these folks feel this sways them at the ballot box? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, Dasha, actually, I want to ask you exactly about that and sort of party lines here. I mean, when it comes to such a hot button topic like abortion, a lot of people do sort of think maybe that the issue's divided along party lines, or at least that's what it might seem on its face. But that wasn't the case with this group of women, right? I mean, what role do they feel politics plays in this debate?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, there were a few things that this really diverse group of perspectives agreed upon. One is that they feel like politics has failed women across the board. They feel like there's a divide between the people who talk about this issue on the campaign trail and in, at the Capitol versus the reality that women are facing on the ground. Take a listen to a little bit of that.
Politics has been weaponized. And honestly, I really feel that abortion's been weaponized, the topic of abortion. It really has been used by the right as a single voter issue. But, I'm not exactly happy with the Democratic Party either, because what have they done to prevent this?
On both sides, we have people taking the extreme circumstances with whatever moral issue that ends up in politics, and it breeds this kind of culture that there's no listening, there's no empathy.
Savannah, one other thing that all of these women agreed upon is that there needs to be more support for women from the time that they're pregnant through childcare and daycare through K through 12 education. They believe that there hasn't been enough action from legislators, from leaders, from lawmakers on providing sort of the infrastructure for women who are pregnant to really be able to take care of that child from birth, Savannah.
Absolutely. That's an important next step in this conversation here. Dasha Burns, thank you so much. Now, the Dobbs ruling raises new questions for millions of American women living in states where abortion will soon be illegal in most cases. Joining us now is Dr. Diane Green-Foster, professor and director of research in reproductive health at University of California, San Francisco. Good morning, Dr. Foster. Thanks for joining us. So you wrote a book based on a 10-year study that you led, focusing on the real-life consequences of abortion. You said in a Politico article that you were inspired by the very different experiences specifically of your two grandmothers. So can you first just talk to us about how you got started with this research and what you were looking for when designing the study?
So the study was designed to look at the consequences of receiving versus being denied a wanted abortion. And when we started maybe 15 years ago, I had no idea how relevant this was about to become, because now with this Dobbs decision, many people will not be able to get the abortions they seek. In the Politico article, I wrote about my two grandmothers who both became pregnant before Roe v. Wade. One of them traveled to Puerto Rico and got an illegal abortion, and the other one carried the pregnancy to term and placed my mom for adoption. And both of those, their experiences are strongly related to the findings we find many years later when we did this longitudinal study of women seeking abortions across the country, where people who become pregnant when they don't want to be and carry the pregnancy to term experience serious physical health hardships. And adoption is not an easy solution, not a simple solution to this problem. And the other grandmother who had an illegal abortion, she managed to do it safely in Puerto Rico. And I think that after Dobbs, many people will be forced to have illegal abortions, and those will actually be safer than they were pre-Roe if people can get their hands on medication abortions, but on these pills, on ordering pills online, for example. But I think that what we overlook often is very serious consequences for people who are pregnant. They don't want to be pregnant. They don't feel that they can afford to have a child, and they're forced to carry that pregnancy to term.
Based on what you learned, I mean, what do you think this ruling means for women living in states that have already or will likely soon outlaw most abortions?
I think what we're going to see is a lot of people feeling forced to circumvent their state laws, and people with the means will travel hundreds of miles to a clinic outside their state. And people without means will either try and order pills online, and if they get the right pills and get follow-up care, they'll be fine. But if they don't, there certainly could be complications that will be very scary. And then many people will carry a pregnancy to term, and those people, maybe that's seen as a success for people who are opposed to abortion. But what we found is that when people are denied an abortion and carry the pregnancy to term, they experience years of physical health, worse physical health and worse economic outcomes. And that affects them, their existing children, and also the child born that they felt that they weren't prepared to take care of. So there are long-term hardships that are going to be imposed by this decision.
When you talk about they weren't prepared to take care of, I mean, what does that ultimately mean for the children? How does it change your life?
What we see is that more than half of women who seek abortions are already mothers, and they often give the reason for abortion that they want to take care of the kids they already have. And we can see actually worse outcomes for their existing children when they're denied an abortion, both an increase in chance that the kid is living in poverty and less likely to achieve developmental milestones. And for the child that's born because their mom was denied the abortion, when we compare their outcomes to the next child born to women who received an abortion, so these are children born later under better circumstances, we see that those kids that are born later under circumstances that their mothers chose experience less economic hardship and have better maternal bonding.
Dr. Diana Green-Foster, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Now, this decision by the Supreme Court came just days before President Biden headed to Germany for a major global summit. G7 leaders are meeting there with the war in Ukraine topping the agenda. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is covering the meeting in Germany from just right across the border in Austria. Kelly, thanks for being back with us. So some of our G7 allies haven't shied away from condemning this ruling by the Supreme Court. Is this a distraction? I mean, what's this been like for the president to be on the world stage and this sort of be one of the things that's happening right along at the same time that's really making history?
Well, certainly the president knows the weight of this for the American public as he traveled from the U.S. to be here representing the American people on some other very big issues. So there's no doubt that that is something that carries with him. And certainly when you have some of the president's closest allies on the world stage, many of whom have similar points of view on these issues and feel distress over what the U.S. Supreme Court has done, it could open the door for some conversations about that. But that is not what President Biden has said has taken place here. He has been asked by reporters who are traveling in the pool, so those up close to the president, if this issue of the abortion ruling has come up. He has said it has not. It is certainly not a part of what the G7's work is. So if it came about in perhaps a dinner conversation or times that they spend together over the 3-day period that they're here together, because certainly there is some personal time for these leaders, maybe that has taken place. But it certainly does affect how the world views the United States, and by extension, that may put President Biden in a somewhat different position as he is always trying to represent the American values when he travels abroad. So in those ways, it may carry to this summit. But the summit itself has some big, substantial issues that he's working on with world leaders, and that's taking up quite a bit of their time. Savannah?
Absolutely. Of course, like the war in Ukraine, which I want to ask you about in just a moment. But first, one more question on the topic of abortion, because here at home, a growing number of lawmakers, people in the streets are specifically calling on the president to take action on this issue. But realistically, what can he do?
Limited in that way. The president has certain powers to try to take some steps when it comes to enforcing current laws through his Justice Department. That's something he can do in places where abortion remains legal. He can try to reinforce protection so that women who would travel from one state to another in order to obtain reproductive services, that they would be protected through the FDA. He can try to ensure the accessibility of abortion-related medications. And they can, of course, use other powers like the political weight of the office and looking for other methods to try to strengthen the laws and accessibility to reproductive care in ways that they can. But part of what makes the U.S. system kind of the marvel of the world in many ways is that it does have 3 distinct branches. Congress has to take action on codifying law, and right now Democrats don't have the votes to do that. The executive branch has some ability in terms of regulation and enforcement, and then you have the judiciary, which acted to bring about this issue. So clearly, when the president returns home, this will remain a key issue, both in terms of policy and politics going forward.
And Kelly, quickly, before I do let you go, I do want to turn to the war in Ukraine. President Zelensky has urged G7 leaders to keep the pressure on Russia and again called for more weapons. What's the response there at the G7? What kind of support are they pledging?
Well, there are some substantial new efforts from the U.S. and leaders here to address those concerns from President Zelensky, who did speak to the leaders via video chat, as he is in touch with them regularly by phone. The U.S. in particular will be sending a new surface-to-air missile system, which, when you think about the kind of strike on that apartment building in Kyiv in just the last day or so, that could be one of the tools that Ukrainians could use to try to protect their citizens. Also, there will be other kinds of radar and munitions, additional sanctions against Russia, and other ways that they will try to keep the pressure on Russia. Savannah?
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. Now, coming up, continuing coverage of the future of abortion rights in America and how Friday's landmark ruling could place into jeopardy the rights of other groups. Plus, our Richard Engel in conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky on Putin, the West, and what victory over Russia looks like. That's up next. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back now with the latest on the war in Ukraine. Over the weekend, a Russian missile strike targeted the capital, Kyiv, for the first time in weeks, killing at least one person. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now from Kyiv with more on this. Hey, Richard, good morning.
Good morning. As you were just discussing a few minutes ago, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, how much support Ukraine receives from the West is a major focus of the G summit in Germany right now. And President Zelensky addressed those leaders by video conference. Earlier, we sat down with him, and in his address to the leaders, including President Biden, he is asking for more sanctions against Russia. He wants more weapons to come to this country. And he says with that kind of support, he hopes to end the war before next winter. But Russian President Vladimir Putin has made it very clear he's not done yet.
Russia carried out one of its most coordinated and intense bombings in weeks across Ukraine this weekend, including now rare cruise missile strikes in Kyiv, where an apartment building was hit. Authorities say a 7-year-old girl was pulled from rubble, her father killed. It seems President Putin is bombing the capital again as a reminder that Russia still threatens all of Ukraine and can dial up the war on command. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told us in a wide-ranging interview in collaboration with the Aspen Ideas Festival that President Putin is trying to drive a wedge between Ukraine and the West.
We are moving forward somewhere, and somewhere else we are retreating. But facing Russia one-on-one, I understand that it is going to be difficult for us, and probably we will not be able to hold out. Therefore, support is of paramount importance, support from Europe and, first of all, from the United States.
What does victory look like for you? And how does this war end?
The war will end for sure. I'm sure it will end with Ukraine winning, whatever happens. No matter how difficult it is for us, we must oust the occupiers from our land. For as long as we can, we will do that. That's our life. That's our path.
There are reports, rumors, they're not confirmed, that Vladimir Putin is sick. The Kremlin denies it, but there are these reports that he shakes, that he had cancer. Do you know anything? What do you believe? Is he sick?
To be frank, I don't know what is happening with Vladimir Putin, but I believe that over there they are very sick in general, sick with overinflated ambitions, unnecessary ambitions, with no understanding or respect towards international law, or simply no respect towards people's lives.
U.S. officials are likely to announce, Savannah, this week that Washington will provide Ukraine with more radar systems, missile defense systems, and artillery rounds. Savannah?
All right, Richard Engel, a great interview. Thank you so much for joining us with that. Let's now get a check on your Morning News Now weather, which means Michelle Grossman is back. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, Savannah. Great to see you on this Monday. And we have a few things going on today. We're looking at western heat, so temperatures 15 to 20 degrees above what is typical for this time of year, climbing into the 90s and also the 100s. We're looking at monsoon rain continuing. We've seen rain for days and days. I think we're on to our 11th day of rain there. And we're also looking at a nice day through the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes. But we have a long stretching cold front from the New England area, northeast to the southern plains. And we're looking at rounds of showers and storms. We could see some flash flooding. We could see some really gusty winds as well. This is what it looks like on radar right now. You can see some darker colors where you see the yellows, the reds, the oranges. That's where we're seeing some heavier downpours. We're looking at the chance for some embedded thunderstorms as well. So with those stronger storms, that's where we do expect those really gusty winds. So as we go throughout this Monday, we're going to need our umbrella, and we're going to be tracking that. We are also tracking some heavy rain along the Gulf Coast. It's going to be enhanced by a cluster of showers and storms that could become tropical in nature. We're going to watch this over the next several days. It's very slow moving, but either way, it's going to bring some heavy rain to the Gulf Coast states, also to Texas. This is really beneficial rain in some spots because we're so dry in many spots in Texas. So we're going to watch that for you. Also tracking more in the tropics in the central Atlantic. We are tracking a area of low pressure. That's going to possibly or most likely become our next tropical depression. If it does become a named storm, that would be Bonnie, and we do expect that to at least become a tropical storm in the next several days. Here's a look at the heat advisory stretching from the northwest to the southwest. 22 million people impacted, and Savannah, it's going to be hot there. Not a lot of people have air conditioning, so it's going to be a tough day today, but we are better by Tuesday and Wednesday.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. See you in a bit. And coming up on Morning News Now, we'll dig a little deeper into Friday's landmark Supreme Court ruling, looking at it from a few different angles, what it could mean for the rights of other groups in America. And how might it affect your money from Main Street to Wall Street? Our guest will explain all this after the break. Welcome back. LGBTQ activists are sounding the alarm following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, especially given the language in the opinion released by Justice Clarence Thomas. According to the concurring opinion, Justice Thomas wrote, quote, "We should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. We have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents." Jim Obergefell joins us now for more. He was the lead plaintiff in the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court case, Obergefell versus Hodges. Jim, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. So, you know, we talk about abortion rights, and that's Roe versus Wade. We talk about gay marriage rights, and that was your case here. And I'm just wondering, first of all, with the fact that based on this opinion from Justice Thomas, it seems that there's a potential that those rights could be at risk should another case come before the court that concerns that. But I just wonder what you made of reading that opinion and putting it in the context of the future of gay marriage. And, you know, this is not just the name of the case. This is your name that was specifically called out. What did you think when you read that opinion?
Well, you know, I never focus on the fact that it's my name and John's and my story. I focus on the fact that this is about our right to commit to the person we love, to form our families, and to have those relationships, those families respected and protected by our nation. That's a right we deserve as human beings. And this decision overall is a terrible day, a terrible step for our nation. It's such a step backwards for this court, the highest court in the land that is supposed to protect our constitutional rights. It's supposed to live up to equal justice under law in the pediment of their very own building. For them to take back a right that we have enjoyed for almost 50 years is appalling. So the decision overall is a terrible day for this country, for people to control the decisions they make about their own bodies, and it terrifies me for the future of LGBTQ rights. That concurring opinion puts a target on all of those rights, and it's clear that Justice Thomas does not believe that women or queer people are part of we the people.
You know, you mentioned how this is essentially this court that provided a right and then took it away. That's the first time that we've seen that with this overturning of Roe versus Wade. Yesterday was just the 7th anniversary of your case and getting the decision on that case. Were you surprised that it's kind of coming into question? Were you surprised to see it specifically called out? Really any rights, any of these things that are rooted in privacy? What was your kind of reaction to that, given that the court did rule and it did make a decision here that did provide a right?
Well, am I surprised that opponents of LGBTQ plus equality are doing this? Absolutely not. I mean, it was clear in 2015 in the decision in Obergefell v. Hodges that many of the justices still on this court are opposed to our right to exist, our right to be part of this nation. So am I surprised? No. I am surprised that it's happened so quickly. And I'm surprised that so much of our nation just refuses to treat each other with dignity, to treat each other like human beings, to live by the golden rule that they claim to support and that they claim to represent. So I'm disgusted, I'm disheartened, and am I surprised? No, not at all, unfortunately.
What do you think needs to happen next? Because, for right now, the Supreme Court isn't officially returning to this. There's not a case on their docket that's before them that would mean revisiting this particular right and your case. But what do you believe needs to happen next to ensure gay marriage and anything rooted in these right to privacies remain intact? What needs to happen across the country?
Well, we need Congress to step up and to take a stand for what they believe in. Do they believe in these fundamental rights, our right to privacy, our right to have control over our own bodies, our right to form families and to commit to the person we love? We need Congress to step up and propose bills to protect this federally. If members of Congress can't step up and say they believe in these rights that are so fundamental to humanity, then what do they believe in? So we need that to happen. At the state level, we need our states, we need our state legislatures to do the same thing. At the state level, propose and pass laws that protect these rights. Poll after poll shows that the majority of Americans support marriage equality. Poll after poll showed that Americans support a woman's right to an abortion. Well, if you are public servants, do what the public believes and what the public wants. This extreme party that is in control through gerrymandering and everything else they have done to take back the right to vote or to limit it, we have got to vote them out of office. So get involved, vote in every single election, and be loud, protest, march. This is a fight for the soul of our nation, and everybody has to be involved in the way that they can be, the way that is comfortable for them and works for them.
Jim, we saw in these opinions that were released, Justice Thomas's was the only one that specifically called out this potentially being a reason, applying this logic to these other cases and therefore these other rights that have been provided by the High Court, while other opinions that were still in agreement with the majority said, look, it doesn't have a bearing on that. It's not the same thing. Those types of rights do not have anything to do with a child and therefore a life, and it's different. But that obviously leads to confusion, these different types of approaches to this coming from the justices. What's your message to somebody who is confused, who's maybe scared, who doesn't really know what this potentially means for their rights moving forward? What's your message?
Well, my message is I'm right there with you. I am confused. I'm concerned. I'm scared. But I will tell you this. I will not stop fighting for what is right. I will not stop fighting for what our country is supposed to stand for. Equal justice under law, we the people, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that Constitution says in order to form a more perfect union, this decision and the groundwork Thomas has laid for taking away the right to birth control, marriage, and intimate relations, that does not a more perfect union make. I am not alone. There are millions of people, countless people and organizations who are out there who are dedicated to protecting and fighting for these rights. So I understand if you're feeling hopeless, if you're scared, because believe me, I'm feeling scared as well. But there are a lot of people who are dedicated to this, who will not stop marching, who will not stop fighting, who will not stop contacting their elected officials. There are people who will run for office because as a nation, we have got to elect a government and establish a judiciary that actually looks like and reflects who we are as a nation, the way we look, the values we believe in, and the rights that we demand. So it's okay to feel hopeless right now, but just know that there are so many people out there fighting the right fight. And we would love to have you out there with us, making those phone calls, sending emails, calling your elected officials, run for office, march. do everything you can, because I'm not giving up, and there are so many more people than just Jim Obergefell out there who are not giving up.
Jim Obergefell with us just one day after the 7-year anniversary of his case that legalized gay marriage. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Let's switch gears now and talk about what the impact of this abortion ruling could potentially be on Wall Street moving forward. Joining us now is Business Insider's financial reporter, Reed Alexander. Reed, thanks so much for being with us. So first, I want to ask you a question based on a memo obtained by CNBC. So America's largest bank, that's JP Morgan Chase, actually told employees it will pay for travel to states that allow abortion. How are companies going to sort of walk the line here on something like this, of wanting to sort of provide for employees who want that while also not alienating those who are opposed to abortion rights? Also, of course, there's potentially the legal implications that are big open question marks as this becomes a patchwork of different legislation across the country. What do you see happening here for businesses, and what do you make of this Chase memo here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, JP Morgan Chase, not alone in this. Goldman Sachs, Citi, Deutsche Bank, now a bank called Jefferies, a number of financial institutions coming out in the past 72 or so hours and making clear to employees, we are going to pay for your out-of-state travel, as is in the case of JP Morgan Chase in the memo you're referencing, to seek an abortion procedure. However, I think what's important to remember here is we're seeing a lot of these early pledges, but behind the scenes, within the boardrooms at these corporations, you heard your past guest there, Jim Obergefell, say this is a battle for the soul of the nation. Well, companies are trying to figure out, how do they involve themselves at all in that battle? We're seeing them take a stand seemingly on the side of the employee and employees' rights and availability for medical procedures. But of course, they also have to ask questions about their own shareholders and stakeholders' response to all this and how they're going to navigate those pressures in that tightrope.
And Reed, actually, I know at Business Insider, you and your team have reported that financial services industries actually has a history of donating to lawmakers who have sponsored these so-called trigger laws. Tell us more about your investigation there, and tell us more detail about what exactly that means, any implications of that.
Right, absolutely. So we have done extensive research into this, and we have uncovered that financial institutions, for instance, say Citigroup, have donated more than $200,000 in some cases, other banks less so, to politicians that have sponsored these so-called abortion trigger laws. And the way this works is, in certain states, there were laws in place that should Roe v. Wade be overturned, which obviously now has happened, then abortion would be immediately banned. It would be immediately illegal. So Citi and a number of firms, including JP Morgan that we were just talking about, extending this benefit to employees, saying, we will pay for your travel out of state to get an abortion. Well, JP Morgan, alongside Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Deloitte, which is a large consulting firm, have all in some way, shape, or form given tens or in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars to these politicians that are backing these anti-abortion trigger laws. So it really does raise questions about how they view their roles sort of in the broader socioeconomy here of trying to both, play to employees sort of the narrative of we're on your side, we're going to help you, but then also backing politicians that do have this controversial track record. So I think it goes back to that question of how do they navigate that tightrope. One big consideration they might want to be making, though, is 2/3 of American voters said in the spring that they wanted to see Roe v. Wade upheld. So these banks, they're publicly traded companies. They've got to be thinking about the mass sentiment out there right now on the part of most American voters, and they've got to be watching the protests we saw all weekend long.
Absolutely. An interesting conversation to be having here with this particular sector. Reed Alexander, thanks so much. We appreciate your time this morning. Coming up, here we go again. Another tumultuous travel weekend causing pain in paradise. From coast to coast, we've got some top travel tips for a stress-free getaway after the break. Welcome back. Let's get to some financial headlines. And it looks like those Juul e-cigarettes will remain on store shelves here in the States, at least for now. CNBC's Pippa Stevens is back with that in other news. Hey, Pippa.
Good morning. Well, a federal appeals court has put the FDA's ban on sales of Juul e-cigarettes on hold. The company claims the ban would cause, quote, irreparable harm. The court says the purpose of the stay is to give it sufficient time to consider Juul's request for for an emergency review and not a ruling on the merits of the motion. The temporary freeze lasts until at least July 12th. The Wall Street Journal reports Juul is working with its legal advisors on options, including a bankruptcy filing if it can't get relief from the FDA ban. And UK regulators are investigating the co-founder of financial technology company Wise for failing to pay his taxes. Christo Carmen was recently fined by the UK government for defaulting on the tax bill in 2018. The probe could have major ramifications for Wise and its CEO. Carmen could be forced to step down and be banned from the industry if regulators rule he fails their fit and proper test. Wise, which competes with PayPal, Western Union, and others, made a name for itself by tackling hidden fees. And Apple is gearing up to launch a flood of new devices starting this fall. Bloomberg reports these include 4 iPhone 14 models, a set of new iPads, 3 Apple Watches, several Macs upgraded with Apple's new chips, refreshed AirPods Pro Buds, a new HomePod, and a boosted Apple TV model. The iPhones, iPads, watches, Macs, and Apple TV are expected this fall or late this year, while the HomePod won't likely be unveiled until early next year. Back to you.
All right, lots of cool stuff to look for there. Pippa Stevens, thank you so much. Now, with 4th of July just around the corner, Americans are preparing for what's shaping up to be a busy holiday weekend. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is at Miami International with more on the travel madness.
There's no denying the fact that for months, for travelers, it has felt like a travel nightmare, and there's no signs right now of that letting up. This morning already, we're looking at almost 700 cancellations nationally, according to FlightAware, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 plus cancellations over the weekend, 10,000 delays as people are snarled coast to coast. Now, at this point, it looks like this is probably the calm before the July 4th frenzy.
On the heels of another weekend of travel turmoil, those hoping for a smooth flight are finding themselves at a sudden standstill.
I got here, I was probably about 150, 200 person in line, and I can't even see the end of the line now. I'm stuck.
The line of passengers waiting to speak with an airline agent at Miami International, longer than this hallway.
We got the message to book another flight. We went to book another flight. There was nothing.
At Hawaii's Kona International, a panorama of pain in paradise. It even took Anthony Morris more than 24 hours to go from Charlotte to Houston midweek.
They told us the reasoning why it was delayed was because they didn't have enough flight attendants.
The staffing crunch coming as the long 4th of July weekend is on the radar, and air travel is predicted to be near a pandemic high. More than 11 million passengers expected to depart from U.S. airports. Experts say the holiday rush leading to even more headaches.
To put it in perspective, over Memorial Day weekend, we saw about 25,000 flights delayed, and we're expecting to see the same or more over 4th of July weekend.
The turbulence, jet-fueled by soaring summer demand and compounded by carriers dealing with staffing shortages at all levels. Most critically, pilots, cabin crew, even ground handlers, including air traffic controllers. The trouble behind the scenes, creating a nightmare for many looking to get away.
As you look around, what do you see?
Chaos.
These families at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport waiting 90 minutes or more just to check their bags.
Even if you wanted to change your flight on a Saturday morning at Atlanta's airport, the line to see someone is about 2 hours long, at least.
If I get to my destination in Portland, Maine before midnight tonight, I will be pleasantly surprised.
To dodge a travel doomsday, travel pros advise booking a nonstop flight, even if it's pricier, and traveling earlier in the day, helping avoid a chaotic chain reaction as delays and cancellations pile up. And if you're forced to rebook at the airport, find the fastest help by pulling double or even triple duty while waiting in line. Stay close to the agent desk, try to get someone on the phone, and use the customer service chat feature online, all to prevent fireworks at the airport before the 4th.
Now, the federal government is considering taking action against the airlines if the situation doesn't improve with the July 4th holiday. The likely litmus test here, Pete Buttigieg, the Treasury Secretary, says enforcement actions are being considered against the airlines, likely in the form of fines should they not meet consumer protection standards. There is also a situation where on Friday, the industry representing the airlines is pointing the finger at the FAA, saying that they are not properly staffing air traffic control centers. So the blame game goes on, as customers right now and passengers are just dealing with the fallout. In Miami, Sam Brock, NBC News.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.